topic at hand is, what are you guys doing for, to cope with quarantine? Is this your first time having a quarantine?
My first.
Okay. Betty, is this your first time having a quarantine?
Yes, I can't recall any other time that was anything where the government said stay home.
Yeah. But I mean, have you ever been in any situation where there was a quarantine, that somebody even quarantined you? Like,
No. Not really.
Well, I had one where I was quarantined back when I was in China, when we bombed the Yugoslavian embassy or the Chinese embassy in Yugoslavia, and so I was teaching there, and I think it was on it was like on a Friday, or it was on a Friday that all the students demonstrated. So they asked us teachers and all of us Westerners, just you stay in the room on Friday and over the weekend, and let this kind of settle down, and then come back and teach Monday. And I hung out in my apartment for the weekend there and watched the kids. I was on this what was called Farmers Road, and all the kids in the city of Zhengzhou all marched by with signs, and there was probably 5 different types of signs, all of them almost the same, that, down with U.S. imperialism and, U.S. killers, and so I watched all them go by, and it was I probably had a little bit of the wrong attitude, but I was kind of laughing at it, because I was just like, this isn't a demonstration. This is just a bunch of kids wanting to get out of school and have fun for the day, and they're following along with what else was happening all across the nation. All of it started in Beijing, and then moved across the nation, and they basically, the government said, well, we're going to let everybody off, so that one day everybody wants to demonstrate, and a part of you thinks, well, did the government decide to do this, or did the people decide? And I do think it was more, the government didn't have to decide, because there's all this enthusiasm, seeing what happened with the students in Beijing were so enthusiastic about it that every student wanted to, and the government was like, well, sure, we'll let you out of school, because this goes right along with all of the news that we're spreading of American imperialism, so go for it. And so it was kind of interesting, and I thought, I didn't really, like I said, I didn't think a lot of it, but there was one time I was walking a couple weeks later, and got criticized by some Chinese woman for being an American or something, and thought, wow, yeah, I guess that did have an effect, because before that everybody loved us over there, and so there was that one small incident, or a couple, and other than that, and it was just a day. So it's kind of like what this is, in that I just watched the press briefing of Kristi Noem, and they're saying now they think the peak is going to be around mid-June, and we're probably going to be in our homes till August,
if we can stand it. That's the only thing I heard from her again. Well, would you be able to stay locked up that long in your own home? I don't quite understand her. She confuses me with the way she presents it, but I'm easily confused.
Yeah.
So what year was that, Mike, when you were in China?
I was there. That was in the year that I left was 1999.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was the last my last semester there.
So it wasn't very long, and it was you perhaps weren't as confined as someone might feel if they suddenly had to not be able to go to the store for a week.
Right. Yeah. How about you, Mr. Diggs? Have you had some confinement? I'm kind of assuming maybe you have, because you didn't jump in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've had various kinds of reasons where I've had to stay in and lay low or not go out. But I wouldn't call them quarantine in the sense that we have now, because I mean, Well, of course, in South Dakota, yeah, it's the same because I can go out if I want to. But I mean, there's some places where people just say, hey, look, like if you don't have some legitimate reason, don't go out, And but so I've never had that kind of thing, especially like with, like as in disease, you know what I mean? And I don't think that there's been that many cases in recent history, recent meaning in the last 50 years, where any place in the world has had a general, let's say, lockdown quarantine. Even during the time of like Ebola, I don't remember people saying, having a quarantine, mostly because it was a different kind of transmission, as I understand it. So they did, quarantine wouldn't make that, that much of a difference. But where it's this kind of transmission pattern, then quarantine makes more sense. And especially when the virus can stay on inanimate objects, non-living objects, and live and basically go into hibernation or just be ready to activate itself. I haven't seen many cases like that have brought it to the level where it's quarantine. The other thing is if you have a vaccine, that is in effect a kind of quarantine because you localize or you break a transmission cycle by the fact that those people have vaccines. So kind of flu type things, they apparently, that becomes a kind of a quarantine. So to answer your question more directly, no, I have never been in this kind of quarantine situation. So that's one of the reasons I'm interested in discovering how people cope, with a new thing, a new situation where, the Boy Scouts may say be prepared, but how do you be prepared for something that's not been experienced by anybody else? So you don't have any idea. Well, if you say be prepared to go for a week without power, food, water and stuff, okay, you have storms and stuff like that, you can figure that and you can be prepared. But if you say 3 or 4 months or 6 months, what kind of preparation can you make for that? So I'm just curious as to how people are processing that kind of new thing.
Well, so far for me, it is much as it was. I grew up here, and being prepared was a way of life for my parents to have food in the house and be as self-sufficient as they could. And I've been kind of hibernating all winter because I have lots to do that I'd like to be home. But I don't think I have really thought a lot about the fact that this might be the case all summer long. I guess the main thing, aside from having a loss of power, which I don't think that'll happen, but I don't know. But the main thing is to be able to have access to groceries when you really need them. And that would have to be quite a while before I would starve to death in my own home. But at least it seems as if the grocery stores are going to remain open, even if it's at limited times and with limited provision. So it's not horrifying to me. It's a time of returning to hibernation with better weather and being able to go out to the park or to some place where I can still be isolated from the other people and have a change of scenery. It's not like being in prison or something.
Well, one person did mention that it gives people some kind of idea of what it's like to be in prison, though it's different. House arrest is different than the other thing, but just not being able to go where you want to go is a psychological disturbance for a lot of people. If you haven't experienced that before, I don't know like how do you make the connection with that, with a new experience that you've never experienced anything like that, and it's unexpected. In this case, we've had something of a gradual transition because people have been talking about it for a while, even though some people have pretended like it, like the whole thing was a hoax. Still, there are some people have been talking about it for a while. So we've had a gradual transition, but now we're actually not in it yet, I don't think, because as it gets worse, then people they start panicking. That's what I'm concerned with, is that it's like kind of like putting your hand on something hot. For the first split second, it's not that big of a deal. If you just sort of like touch it and bring it back, most people can handle that because you just can. But then if you hold it there for a while, that same heat now starts to bother you a bit. And that's what I'm concerned with, as people spend longer time. One of the big concerns for me would be domestic violence. I think that, we can expect to see an unprecedented amount of that. And then the sad thing there is people don't really have a way to get away, and I don't mean just male on female or female on male violence. I'm really worried more about the children, because the children, they can't get out. They start to be irritated. I was talking to someone a few days ago, and the baby was just going off. It was crying and crying and screaming and screaming. And the parent was trying to be as calm, but you think, okay, one day of that is one thing, about 6 weeks of that, and the person is not the same person that they were when they had a way to regroup, So, and children, of course, are much more helpless than adults. So I'm worried about the children and what is it that we can do for those families to help people who are basically good people, but these kind of situations can bring them to a brink that they had not expected to have to cope with.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's really very good point. Siblings with each other, and then I was talking to a guy who he's been thinking and talking about this for months. Prior to, he's been kind of cooped up in his. He's got a camper unit out west of town, and he's kind of going through some stuff. So he's been without a job for a couple of years actually, and this has been his obsession, this virus, and he predicted all of this happening, and eventually, months ago, and now, he's kind of worried about, what's going to happen after a couple months when people are getting hungry and they can't get food, and the banquet. You talk about these families with kids. You go to this banquet in Sioux Falls, and I think I don't know, maybe they serve up to 500 people a night some nights. And they would tell you how many are kids, and I know that it's a high number of kids. Imagine those kinds of families, and they can't manage the kids as it is. They can't take them out, and they can't feed them. I don't know how that's something that I keep. I just thought about it. I'd like to ask about. I don't know if the banquet is just delivering food now to people because they can't have 500 people into a place to eat. And so then these people that are staying in these homes that where they're just bedded down, and how are they living? I tell you, don't see anybody asking about that at this press conference. All their how many people are, they keep asking, and I get upset when I listen to them asking questions of Trump and he won't answer. And Noam, at least, I like that she doesn't try to lie or change the subject or do some hyperbole about, oh well, I closed off China and keep repeating the same things. At least she says, I don't want to say the number of people that are going to die. I mean, we think that it could be between 200,000 to 300,000 people that are going to get the disease. And you can do the math, it's going to be between 0.5% up to 3% that die. And I mean, we could have medical things that come along that help, or certain people react differently. And so I like the way that she at least answers it, in the, she doesn't want, I don't expect her to give a number, but those are the questions the press gets all wrapped up in. But what about the question you're asking? Are these low-income people? Where are they getting food? What's happening at the banquet? What's happening with food delivery? Our church, I'm at the Unitarian Church here, and we're not real plugged in with all the other churches. So I maybe need to just check and see what these other. I think that's probably what's picked up a lot of this churches in town or something.
But the other thing is the churches themselves are kind of quarantined too, from meeting. And the interrelationships that people have that allow them to work together. A week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, that works. But what I've seen is like, if people go for months and they don't have that support, people can start to withdraw within themselves and think about every man for himself.
Yeah.
That's the other thing you start to see almost right away for some people, because that's the way they think anyway. It's like, well, everybody's got, as one person says, be responsible, which means like just be responsible for yourself. Don't worry about everybody else. But of course, in a situation like this, that cannot work. That cannot work, is that when every person, that's chaos. And that's where you don't have people who are being injured and killed from the disease. You have it injured and killed from the pandemonium that is a result of the disease and a result of people just sort of like, they go into a different mode when they get scared. So I'd like to brainstorm and, with what kind of things might people do to, let's say, give us a longer period where we can stay sane, and what kind of things can people put in place to calm people and take as many people out of that panic loop as possible. Because then at least the more people you can take out of the panic loop, the better, more like governmental agencies like police and fire and even the National Guard, the Army, they can have a better chance at controlling a few people. If you get a lot of people doing that, the thing just breaks down into nothing, So I'm looking for ways how that we can crowdsource people helping to keep each other calmed down and supply some of those needs, like what kind of things can we do for the families who are locked in? What kind of things can we do for those homeless people, as Mike puts it? What kind of things can we do for the frontline people like nurses and doctors? Because if, those people are stressed at the beginning of the crisis, what happens when it's a long-term stress? What happens if those people say, hey, look, if I do this anymore, I'm going to hurt somebody, I quit. What happens then? What do we do then to support those people so that they can have more resilience?
I've seen and heard of. I kind of live through Facebook sometimes. Just a few little things that I'll mention that I'm aware of. Some people have gone around through their neighborhood and left a calling card or a little note explaining, I live across the street or around the corner. Here's my name and my phone number. And if you need anything, call me. Or they are also people who are calling people that they know maybe a little bit, enough to have a phone number or get one, and just calling people periodically just for a chat. Older people, people who live alone, that kind of thing. Some things I've seen around the neighborhoods, and I hear it's going on in some of the small towns around here too, is the people who are taking care of their children at home, doing the whole thing all day by themselves, maybe taking the kids out for a walk, and they're going on a bear hunt. So people are putting stuffed bears in their front window. So the kids have that to look for and talk about.
That's pretty cool.
My niece, who lives up in the northeast part of Aberdeen, lives in a really great neighborhood. I think partly because she's there, they've made it that way with things like block parties in the past and, just neighboring in a more old-fashioned way. And a few days ago, an elderly lady who's been next door to her forever was moving to an apartment here in town, but she was leaving the neighborhood. And so as she was being taken away to wherever she was going, whether she was driving herself or had a truck hauling or whatever, but the neighborhood all got out at the ends of their driveways with signs and flags and cheers and waved her off, just to say a send off until they could see her again in person. So those seem like very little things, and there are others I know too going on. People are coming up with oddball Facebook groups. There's one going on here. I don't know where it came from, but go outside at 8 o'clock at night and howl at the moon or something. And people are actually doing it and I hear of singing, people who live in apartments in some of the big cities or something, hanging out their window and singing or applauding. I heard of people applauding at a certain hour of the evening for the healthcare people.
Those are really good suggestions, Betty. And I particularly like the last one of people singing together, because that is something that can lower a stress level. And if people could, for example, one of the earlier things you mentioned was to call people, like leaving a number for people to call. If people could create a phone tree just with the people that they know, because it's 6 degrees of separation. If everybody calls 10 or 15 people that they know, and those people did the same thing, you can have quite a communication network just doing that. And if you were to, in your neighborhood, call the people that you know, even if you only know 2 people's phone number, and sometimes we can find it on either the internet or an old telephone book, or if you still have those, we still get telephone books here in Roslyn. But if you can just call 2 or 3 people that you know and say, hey, look, we're planning to have a singing thing. We can, like, especially after it warms up. Right now with snow on the ground, that doesn't seem so appetizing. So it's such a good idea. But as it gets warmer, if people can go outside and just say, hey, look, we're going to be at our house and we're going to sing these songs. And here's the way the song goes. It's on the internet. And if you go outside 2 or 3 nights, then you're going to know the songs, and have people sing, or even drumming. If people can just have a drum or something like that, and they pick a night and everybody does it, I think that can relieve some of the frustration. And it also can create a kind of bonding between people that helps to play down that every man for himself, because now you realize that there is somebody else out there and they care. And if we can keep that kind of thing, is like, there are people there and they care. And if we can work together, then we can get through this. I think the people who are on the kind of every person for themselves channel, basically they get there from loneliness, being alone, and of course also the, having interpersonal relationship issues, like, some people have very difficult time to talk to anybody, and so they become lonely, and then they wrap themselves in it's all for me, and as long as I have enough ammo and my 4 quarts of water, I can survive without further thought of like, okay, what happens when there's nobody to shoot, but you don't have any food, because everybody left, or is everybody's dead, so nobody's providing any food. And if you're the last person, then what happens, Well, that's where I think like just letting people know that there are other people out there, they care, and that gives us a chance anyway to say, okay, what is it can we do? We can have that talking to people and say, hey, John over at so-and-so, he's run out of beans, or he's run out of, ketchup or filet mignon. He's ate his last filet mignon. So, and then somebody could come by and just drop it off, So we have options. So I'd like to explore some more.
One thing, they've got this, I was just pulling it up here. I forgot about this. And somebody said something about it recently, is that nextdoor.com. It's a social media thing for neighborhoods. And so you sign up, and I don't know, are both of you in like you're in Roslyn? I don't know where, Betty, where are you?
I'm in Aberdeen.
They may have that up there. I know I had signed up for this when I first moved here, and I had forgotten all about it. But it was something that I kind of thought, well, it'd be kind of nice to know what's going on. And I think I remember looking at it, it was mostly like a rummage sale kind of thing. But now I would imagine there's a lot more going on in there. And, it may be easier to organize these types of things through social media. I like the idea of sing along or drum along. I think all those are great. They had a light up the night Sioux Falls here a couple days back. People all went out with flashlights, and some people brought their Christmas lights out. All the kids painted their driveways, different things, and so I thought that was nice. I was trying. There was something else. I guess the 2 ideas I had was that next door, and then well, and then just like you say, calling people. We've decided at the UU Church they've given a list of people to call. So I've got 7 people, and I've called most of them and just check in with them and see what they're doing. And I'd like to keep calling people, but I like your idea of maybe somehow getting a network together somehow. So, because if you just leave your card at someone's house, how far, what's it going to take for them to truly call you? Where if you have hey, we're all going to meet on Zoom every Wednesday at 5:00 in the neighborhood, here's the ID, just log on, and whoever joins, and we get to see each other and talk to each other. Because I'm really finding that, like, this neighborhood, I've been here for 3 years, going on the 4th, and the only people I know is the person on this side of me, and I've met this person on this side, and the guy across the street from me are the ones that I know the best, these 2 basically. And the other ones, I've tried to reach out to some degree, and people, it's funny to me that people, we don't have kids, so since we don't have kids to interact with, people just kind of interact through their kids, it seems like. Where now, all of a sudden, I've met more of the neighbors in the last 2 weeks of walking my dogs than I have in the 3 years I was here. So I think people are more open to doing stuff. And so if you give them the right tool, maybe keep trying everything. Give them a card, give them an address, a time. We're meeting on Zoom or something. I mean, keep giving them opportunities. Or it's next door. Maybe I think people are willing to reach out a lot more right now.
Well, and people who ordinarily are very, very busy just about their everyday life, with that all removed, I am busy of my own choosing because I'm retired and I live alone and I have no real obligations. But still, I do keep a calendar, and I do have things I've chosen to participate in, and now with this and everything being stopped, I'm surprised how much more relaxed I am, and and so I would be looking for things if I didn't have some things already in place. That's a real interesting observation that people are more open to be neighborly now.
I'd like to explore like some things that people can be doing. If there's one thing that's the most important commodity that we have as humans, it's time. And certainly we have a lot of that now. But many people don't know what to do with their time, and they tend to fill it with work or some obligations. And now if they can't do those things, it's like they're in this large cavernous place where they don't really know what to do. It's like people work till they die, because if they stop working, they will die because they have no idea what to do other than their work. So this is another kind of stress, that negative stress, the vacuum of, well, what can I do now? So I'd like to explore what kind of things might people find to do to not just waste time, but to use the time that they have been given, in air quotes, to do something that will benefit them in both the short term and the long term.
It's hard for me to get into somebody's head who doesn't have more than enough to do of their own choosing. And I'm grateful for that, because I'm surrounded by books that I won't live long enough to read them all, although each one of them was chosen because I knew I wanted to read it. I do artistic things. I'm a painter primarily, and so I have to work to balance to get my head over there instead of food preparation so that I can eat when I'm painting. So self-care, I am probably pretty selfish in that way. But I know there are a lot of people who don't even have a hobby. I don't consider mine hobbies. I just consider them to be extensions of my getting, my living my life. They're things I do because of that. But I don't know how you pull somebody to help them believe that they can do something other than go to work and because, a lot of times I think the work they have been used to is kind of mindless. You show up, you go through the motions, you go home, you're tired, you sleep in front of the TV and then go to bed.
Rinse and repeat.
Yeah. I remember not all that long ago that it was sort of customary that people retired at 60 or 65 and then sat down. And we're not like that anymore. But there are still some people who have that notion of that's how old age is going to be. So that's a very interesting thing to consider.
Mike, would you have any ideas about what people might consider doing to fill their time usefully?
Yeah, that's it's tough to think of it in this. I'm more on Betty. I've been amazed at what I how the time flies by during the day. I do still work. I do about 4 hours a day, with 4 to 6 hours a day with this company I've been working with for a couple of years, doing some consulting. And then I'm trying to start some own businesses, and I'm gonna. I don't know if you saw, I'm gonna run for district house office in the legislature. So I'm doing all that. But so what? And but I've seen people doing cooking. I mean, some of the things I see, like Betty's saying, that I see a lot more on Facebook. The number of people cooking different things and games. What's that? You are? Yeah.
I'm one of those. I've been posting photos and descriptions of some of the meals I've put together, because that's one of my areas of, I guess, expertise and experience in life. And I'm kind of proud of being able to live out of my own pantry if I have to. Yeah, go ahead. I just wanted to throw that.
Yeah, I think that's I've cooked I still am. I'm a pretty simple cook. I've cooked a few things that I haven't cooked in a long time. Spaghetti and a couple hamburgers.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually watched a YouTube video on making sourdough bread. I don't know if I'm going to go that far, but it sure looks like it'd be fun to do. So it's opened me up to interest. So yeah, I find it. I guess I'm. When I was younger, I was the kid that was always begging my mom, find something for me to do. I'm bored. Where my other brother, he could keep himself occupied all the time. And I was so jealous of that. And now I've found I'm kind of similar. I don't have a lack of stuff to do. So I find it kind of hard to imagine not being able to find stuff to do. Yoga, I do exercise. And the TV, sadly, the TV is always, it's pretty darn easy to turn on and watch movies too. Mm-hmm. Yoga, I guess, would be the one. Yoga and meditation, though, I'm trying to do some videos online of me doing yoga and meditation, and if I could get more people to make their own practice, I think that, and I don't know about Betty, but I don't think I'll have any argument with Lawrence on that. That was one of the first things when I started volunteering at the prison. Is I was like, I'm kind of envious of you guys. You really have an opportunity of a lifetime. And some people, sadly, it's their whole life. But you could just sit and meditate up here every day. And I mean, I'm so amazed at what meditation can do for a person. It's just mind-blowing to me what it can do. But I have meditated at times that I didn't recognize the significance of it. So I don't know, just because people meditate, that they're getting out of it what I started to get out of it just 3 to 5 years ago when I restarted doing it. It struck a different place in me that I'm just like, wow, I could do this. I could go and do this into the caves of India, and now I understand it. So.
That's very cool. I have the closest I've come to meditation that I'm aware of is my now lapsed practice of Tai Chi, but I am to the point to being ready to pick that up again. And I do have a good video course thing here that I can use at home, and there's nothing preventing me except myself. But yeah. Maybe
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm finished.
I'd like to go back to something Mike was saying about the meditation. Sometimes people are not ready for meditation because, it's nice to have, especially in a situation like this, it's nice to have someone to sort of like guide you through the thing. And you have to be in a certain state of mind or ready to get into that state of mind. So one of the things that it can be a preface or a precursor to yoga or meditation is breathing, just learning to breathe and the different ways of breathing. And there are a few TED Talks about breathing, and they have some examples of how different ways to breathe. There are also many YouTube videos on how to breathe. And people can find books on breathing and that kind of thing. So I would say that if people can even start to become aware of their own breath, and maybe not a formal meditation, but just sitting on a seat with one's back straight and breathing in some of the different patterns that people can learn, that can go a long ways to clearing a person's mind. It can, and if their mind is clear and they're calm, they're much better. They will have a longer time between wife beatings, before, if they can just chill themselves out, and I say that half jokingly because, we can't let perfect be the enemy of good. It's sort of like, okay, the longer you can keep spacing out, flipping out. So during this, 4 to 6 month period that we're in more or less lockdown, maybe there's 3 incidents as opposed to 1 every other night, and I consider that a win, So whatever we can do to help people to find their balance and become connected with their true selves, it's possible that people could emerge from this actually better people when they learn finally to live with themselves, the one that they hate most. They learn to live with themselves, and then maybe they can live with others. If they can learn to live with that family that they have, they may be able to live with the people better when they are able to emerge from this. So I see some potential of actually improving from the crisis. It's like the lotus growing out of the mud.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know about you, Mike, but I was sitting here doing some relaxation breathing, listening to Lawrence.
Another area that I think that goes right along with the breathing, meditation, yoga, are things like sleep. Sleep is a lack of sleep is the most chronic disease in the United States now, according to the projections by the CDC. And lack of sleep causes a lot of things like concentration difficulties, people eating too much, then they feel tired, they drive half asleep, all of the kinds of things. It's bad for their heart, it's bad for all of their internal organs. As a result of lack of sleep, their breathing gets off, it gets shallow, and then it's just, the whole thing kind of compounds and cascades in a bad direction. So I think as we talk to people, to encourage them to be aware of their breathing, that could be useful as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, being aware of their sleep patterns. And maybe some people are going to become aware of sleep apnea and snoring and all of the things that go along with bad sleeping, all of the things that keep us from sleeping well. And each one of us that can do better in any of these areas, position ourselves to help others to do better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a real good point. Yeah, sleep. That's a big one right there.
Yeah, I've had a personal revelation with that in the last 2 years. And It's amazing. I thought I was losing it, going into some kind of dementia or something, because I couldn't even carry numbers from one column to the next and remember things. But it was sleep apnea, and with the machine, I've recovered much more. I'm doing a lot better, not just in my mathematics, but in life in general. It's amazing.
Well, I think this has been a pretty good session. I'm hoping that our technical difficulties will be overcome by our next session, and that we will have more people to get more ideas and share more ideas from. I want to thank both of you for participating, and maybe the next time when we come together again, some new ideas will emerge. I think throughout this quarantine period, from time to time, I'd like to revisit this subject to check in with people to see if new ideas have come up, and what some of the old ideas, what kind of results are people seeing, so that those ideas which are worthy can spread, and those which are maybe not working so well, we can kind of let them die their own death. But in addition to that, I would like to explore some other subjects, and I will also be looking for other people's ideas of like things that they would like to talk about too. But the focus that I would like for this effort is really to have these kind of conversations where we crowdsource ideas, where different people can have something that they can add and a perspective that others may not, from their life's point, be able to see.